What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to rank every boss in Split Fiction from worst to best. So, a couple of things I want to say just as criteria before we get in. They've got to be actual fights. So, I've seen a lot of people lump in the game show host, the Kraken, and the Monkey King as bosses. They are like events, but you don't actually fight any of them one-on-one. Therefore, I'm not going to count them. And in terms of my criteria, what I'm 95% judging is the actual fight in and of itself. When you're actually shooting, when you're actually battling the actual boss. Okay, so let's just jump in with number 17. Now, I think this is a very clever visual kind of thing that's going on, not necessarily a great boss fight. So we're going to talk about the crab and the duck in the side story where it's more like illustrated. I really like this level as a whole. I think it's beautiful. I love it when things do this. I think to Unfinished Swan or What Remains of Edith Finch, it's a phenomenal side story. It's a phenomenal level. One of my favorites in the entire game for its creativity. When it comes to the boss fight itself, it's really not all that difficult. I don't think it's supposed to be difficult, so I don't want to, go after it too much. There's really no bad boss fight, I think, in this entire game, but this one, it's almost an afterthought compared to the level that it's in, and therefore it's number 17. With number 16, I'm going to put Mr. Hammer, and it's not bad. It just seems kind of, you're going to see this process repeat, and I think actually that's what holds this boss fight back the most. I think it's got a pretty epic conclusion, but when you look at what Mr. Hammer is doing, what you have to do, and kind of using both of your powers to defeat a certain part of him, you're going to see that repeated, right? That's in 7 different boss fights. So for me, ranking them, it just was kind of okay, which one was more over the top or which one had more a cinematic feel. This one, it's kind of in an enclosed space. Again, it's the first fight, so it's not necessarily super easy. I think a lot of these boss fights are actually kind of difficult, but it's one of the more simplistic boss fights in the game, and therefore it finds its way at number 16. Okay, number 15, I'm going to say, is the Conductor. Now, this is an example of the criteria I was talking about earlier. There is nothing wrong. In fact, this entire level and the lead up to the Conductor is like the Uncharted 2 train mission on steroids, right? It's really impressive. It's really visually big. There's this feeling of epicness. There's this feeling of scope, right? That's so big. When it comes to the actual fight, it actually gives me Cuphead. Okay, there's plenty other games that are like this besides Cuphead, but for the difficulty at times, it was something I was telling my wife, oh, we should play Cuphead after this. It's a lot of fun. I personally like the side-scrolling shooter type thing. They do it a few times in this game, and this time with ships, right? So I think the lead-up is extremely good and actually would make this better. The actual fight itself, pretty simplistic compared to some of the other fights later on in the game. Okay, number 14, I'm going to say, is the Giant Robot. Now, again, nothing really wrong with this fight. It's kind of by the books. It has elements of several other fights where you have this kind of gigantic enemy at a distance where you can't really do much with, and you're just dodging, a lot of just getting out of the way, and then you're using both of your powers to do something, right? So one of you is blasting the arm back at him, it pops off, and then the other hacks the arm and punches him in the face a couple times. It is, again, it's a cool scope-like thing because this thing is so big, and it does have an epic feel because this fight, being later in the game, I feel almost makes it so, okay, we have to throw more missiles at you, right? There's got to be more stuff on screen that can hurt you. This has that. So it kind of elevates a little bit, but it is more basic. It is more by the books, again, versus some of the more creative boss fights that I like more. Number 13, kind of the same thing. I'm going to give 13 the edge over what we just talked about just because I think it's a little bit more creative, but generally the same thing, actually almost exactly. You got a big giant enemy that you can't really touch. You have to kind of wait for your moment, and again, it's utilizing one of you as the monkey and one of you as the tree, right? And just kind of waiting for your opportunities. I think, again, in terms of that scope, in terms of it kind of having that cinematic feel, this one does have kind of an interlude, right? Where you're sliding down, you have to jump over things. It's kind of getting you from one half of the boss fight to the other half, basically. Again, I'm not going to count that. I'm just kind of throwing it in as, oh, that's cool. It's cool they have that. But, you know, kind of like the gigantic twister that's going on in the center and just kind of waiting for your opportunity. One of you has to go underwater while the other one of you has to kind of just survive for a bit. I do really like that. I'm a big fan of water, and so ice and the kind of color and kind of being in this ice castle I think is really, really cool. So visuals, you know, it's got again the by the books thing, but it is pretty creative for what it is. Okay, number 12, this might be controversial, but stay with me here. I'm going to say is Raider, the final boss fight in the entire game. Now, I'm specifically talking about the boss fight, right? Because if you're going to talk about the entire level, I actually think it's the best level in the entire game. I might do a separate video on that. When you just look at the boss fight, though, it actually gives me, and only because it's a recent game, gives me Suicide Squad Kill a Justice League vibes in terms of Batman and you're far away and you're just shooting it, right? But in that way, it's very basic. It is you are far away, you're handling these projectiles being thrown at you, and you're firing at a huge looming enemy, right? And you're just knocking down its health. Now, it's multi-staged and in terms of like the theming, you know, the setting of the battle obviously changes quite a bit. I do like the idea of just how chaotic it gets when he is raining everything down on you, and then you're piecing together the glitches, and then you have to come together and unleash the glitch, which is going to be a weapon, right? And then you turn that weapon, you use it against him. So again, it's not the most creatively impressive, but it's got a lot of things that are good about it. And again, we're not talking about the actual level, because him as a threat and what he's doing to the levels, I mean, it's an 11 out of 10, okay? But in terms of the actual boss fight, it finds itself at number 12. Number 11, I'm going to say, is the Overseer, and this one has a lot of vibes I really, really like. Again, kind of back to that side-scroller shooter type thing. Now, the thing that's tough with this boss is a lot of it does rely on movement, so it is chasing you a lot. Now, I will give a little asterisk here and say I'll count it for this case, because a lot of the times you're running away, you can actually also deal damage. There are times where like the toxin is rising and that's a really, really cool element. I freaking love that. Again, that would put this higher, just like the one we talked about earlier. But again, I'll be strict on myself. That doesn't really count. Still, I think this is a really, really cool boss. Multi-stage, kind of being in the first half of the game, it has more stages than most. It has more things, even though it's a side scroller, eventually it becomes like a Crash Bandicoot thing where you're running away and you're shooting behind you, right? And you're jumping over obstacles. So it's got a lot going on, even though a good amount of it is kind of running away, not really just standing there. So it kind of finds itself, I guess, in the middle of the pack. Okay, we've reached the top 10. So I actually wanted to put this far, far higher, but I talked myself out of it. I'm going to put the Dentist. So the Dentist, I think, I would say it's high for me just because of like the visual thing. I think it's just a very creepy, very, very cool design. Okay, I love how he looks, and I love just, I guess, the themes of the actual fight. I guess what puts it, again, kind of in the middle, I actually originally thought of this as like a top 5. The thing is, it's just not all that deep, right? You are, again, it's the idea of dodging, waiting for an opportunity, and then using both of your skills. So that's really all it is, and it's actually very short, all things considered, of biting the hand, smashing the hand, biting the hand, smashing the hand, and then drilling him. It's very cool. I really like it. It's got a General Grievous type thing going on with him with 4 arms, so I freaking love that. A great Star Wars. I don't know if it's supposed to be, but it's a cool thing there. I just like it. I like it a lot, but it's just not all that deep, right? Not all that complicated, not all that much stuff going on. Okay, number 9, I'm going to say the SRI Crime Boss. Now, by the way, I would probably say at number 10, maybe even number 11, we stopped being like fine or good, and now we're up to like great. I think a lot of these boss fights are great boss fights, so I just kind of want to make that known. This one kind of rocks. This one is very early. I believe it's the 3rd boss fight of the entire game, and it's the first one that really switches up on you, right? The first 2, you are human, you are just running around, and this one is about drifting. This one is about collecting power-ups and shooting the feet, which is a theme that happens a couple times with these larger ones where there's a lot of movement involved. You shoot the feet, and then you do something else. So for this one, you're shooting its tentacle type, claw arms. It falls, and then you kind of do some like Tony Hawk skateboarder stuff, and you go above it and you shoot down. Really, again, really cool. It's really big in scope in that way. Again, it's the first time that things really, really change up, where you're on the motorcycle, you got to drift, you got to dodge all the flaming projectiles that are coming at you. I really, really like this one. Number 8, we got the Dragon Slayer. Now, this one, I actually really, really liked this one. Again, somewhat simplistic, but I think in terms of all the ones that have the this same kind of simplicity, this one's one of the cooler ones, right? You got the dragon, and the dragons are just kind of standouts in and of itself, but another one where you're kind of waiting for your opportunity, right? Only this one, you are waiting, but you're not really, because this one's kind of very quick, right? One of you can constantly do like the acid attack from long range, and you could do that really no matter what. There's no time that you're really waiting on. The one that tackles, the one that hits like the crystals, that one is a bit more specific, but this one's got a lot going on. I mean, you're on dragons, again, two different kind of attack styles there, and then what's going on in the stage with the not only the crystals that are landing on the ground, but the long range attacks and the kind of the minor enemies that are being thrown at you. There's a lot that's going on here. I think in terms of just the design, this Dragon Slayer, you know, kind of the knight in armor type thing, I think it looks really, really cool. I like just that level in general as well, so I'm going to put this quite high. All right, number 7, I'm going to say is Treasure Trader. Now, this might be actually one of the most different ones of the entire game. You have like a top-down perspective, so just that angle change is pretty unique, I would say, just in general for all these fights. And then again, you know, this one I think really relies on teamwork almost in a different way, because you need, well, really all of them, you need both characters, but you got enemies that are attacking you that you need one to take care of, and then the other one to actually deal damage to the boss, right? But then you also have things that the boss can do to trap either or, and so you need the other person to be able to save the other person. On top of that, you have this kind of dynamic of, okay, there's going to be a fire thing that, you know, separates us. Now you can jump over it, or you can kind of pre-plan it to get in the same zone as the other person, but you can split up. You can split up, and one of them can attack the, again, projectile type thing. The other one can then send it back towards the boss. I just think this one is really, really neat. And then, of course, it ends with the boss joining, right, the arena, and same kind of thing. You're dealing with him spinning and coming at you, but you also need both of the players to be able to handle actually hitting him at the end of the day. So I just think really, really creative compared to the other, and a little bit of an angle change kind of helps it as well. Number 6, I'm going to say, is the Factory Warden. Now, this one is kind of cool, I would say, for two different reasons. I just like the simplicity, while also not being so simplistic, of the first part of it, where it's got its legs and it's kind of multi-staged, right? Like one of you has to shoot it, then the other one uses the bomb, and then you both have to shoot. So it's like a 3-step kind of process. You have projectile or like enemies coming from the ceiling. You have ways of getting around the arena, even though it's a very simplistic design, right? It's kind of just like this factory warehouse type setting. You have a lot of things around you to grapple to get from point A to point B very, very quickly. And then part 2, you know, it does kind of shift it a bit. You got like the acid bath thing in the middle, and then, you know, you have to kind of jump over it, right? Jump over and shoot it from above. So it's got elements of the SRI Crime Boss one, right? The first kind of on wheels one. But I actually think this one is actually better. It's just cooler. It requires that teamwork type thing a little bit more. In fact, actually, the SRI one doesn't require too much at all. One person can kind of do most of it. This one, you really need both of you to be able to handle. Okay, and then we reach our top 5. So number 5, I'm going to say, is the Black Dragon. Now, again, I will make a very big exception for this one because the Black Dragon is very much like a Chronos type thing, right? In God of War 3, where there's a lot of movement involved, and the boss really is the level. So that's where I'm going to make the exception, because for the most part, again, the cool design of the actual level is just to get you from one part of a boss fight to another part. This one, it is the entire thing. It's about inflicting damage on the dragon. Yes, there's like the ending part where you have to, you know, hold on to yourself when the wind is trying to take you. That's a really cool thing. But this one's more about the journey, right? Your dragons hopping in and helping you, and you running away from certain areas. Again, this one is really the dragon himself, the entire journey to get to the head of him. That is the boss fight versus the actual end result. Okay, number 4, I'm actually going to put that Pin Bowser one, the pinball machine one. I really, really like that one. Now, I don't know if it would be lower to other people, but this one freaking rocked. But I grew up, you know, playing pinball like on the old PCs, right? So this one was just a lot of fun. And, you know, this one did require some really good teamwork. I think my wife and I did a really good job at this one just in general, where we were really kind of almost pre-planning, and I was the actual like things that would hit hit. So I was the control, and then she was the ball. And I don't know, I thought this was super, super cool. I mean, I guess, like, this was the least game. This was the least Split Fiction of all of the Split Fiction bosses, right? Because it was just basically a different game altogether. But I really liked it. I think it had a tension to it because there was an escape type element where you had to go pretty fast at times, and you just kind of had to coordinate in a different kind of way than you ever had to before. Okay, number 3, I'm going to say, is the parking attendant. So the second boss in the game, and my God, I mean, this one was really, really good. So I'm a sucker for when they really make you do different things, like both characters. So this one was kind of, well, it was a top 3 type thing. You have kind of the survival aspect of it, right? Staying away. And then you have the element of one of you staying away and still having to use your powers to do something, and the other jumping on him. Now, I was the character, I was Mio, that jumped on him, and I just thought that was so freaking cool. It gave me like Wipeout type vibes, just the visuals and, you know, spinning around, you know, like an orb that's going around like that. I really, really liked it. And again, I'm kind of a sucker for, okay, I'm going to do one completely different element that's hurting the boss in one way, and you're going to do another thing. And I think they just absolutely nailed it. And for it being the second boss fight in the game, it was one of the absolute best. Okay, at number 2, I'm going to put the Hydra. Now, this one was long. This one, even if you don't want to consider the parts of, you know, getting from point A to point B, they were all kind of parts to the fight. So when one of you is going left to right, when one of you is going right to left, like, I consider that part of the boss fight. Towards the end, when you're doing platforming to get from point A to point B to shoot, you know, the ballista at it, that was, I would argue, part of the boss fight. There was just, this one had so many layers to it. This one had the scale, it had the awesome looks. I think the Hydras looked awesome. It had just the creativity. Again, there was multi-layered, just different things you had to do as these characters. I freaking love this one. I thought it was, again, one of the best, and that only leaves Dark Mio as actually my favorite in the whole game. Now, again, in terms of creativity, maybe there were other ones that were creative or more creative. This one, though, this one had that final boss battle type vibes to it because it had everything. I would say it actually had everything more than the Raider one, where it had, again, the by the books part, where you have an enemy and you're kind of waiting for the correct moment, right? Now, this one, though, visually and thematically, I really liked what they were doing there. The music, by the way, there wasn't that many huge, like, spectacular, in my opinion, like, musical vibes throughout the game in these boss fights. This one had the vibe of, like, oh, this is it. This is massive. This is, like, this enormous kind of fight. So I love just the sound. I think the sound really got you in the mood. And then again, much like what we just talked about with the parking attendant, again, kind of a sucker, this one was very, okay, you're going to split up. One of you is not even going to be within view of the other, right? You're going to be inside her mind, basically, and the other is going to be outside. And you're both dealing, by the way, with, like, incredibly stacked odds against you. There are so many projectiles. There's so much going on, and it's kind of a fight for your freaking life. So I just really think it nailed everything. It had the creativity. It took a lot of the elements that past boss fights had and kind of combined them. Again, had the element of splitting up. It also had parts where, okay, we're going to run and get from part A of the fight to part B. So it really had everything, but I just thought it was the most epic. At the end of the day, in the most simplistic way of saying it, I thought this fight was the most epic of all the boss fights in the game. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.